We're going to go ahead and get started and call the Facilities and Real Estate Committee to order. Mikey, can you call the roll for us, please?
Sure, Mr. Barnes. Mr. Jasper, Dr. Marshall, Mrs. Roberts. Here. Dr. Solano. Here. Mr. Temple.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mikey. In the past years, it was always great to be a part of this committee because we always seem to have good news. And even if we started out kind of slow, we always knew it was going to get better before it actually became time to present our final numbers. Unfortunately, I wish that that trend were continuing. It seems that we really are experiencing lean times, and it certainly is having an impact on our ability to expand our universities to meet our growing demands. In light of that, there are several items that we're going to be considering today. And certainly when I say what I just previously said, I'm sure it's not news to any of us. We understand what's happening with our state and the economy as a whole. It's just I'm glad that I was here when things were better. So we know that the good things are just on the horizon. We're just kind of like in a circle here. So the first items that we have are to approve 2 bond authorizations by the BOG debt management, based upon the BOG debt management guidelines. So Chris, will you briefly describe the first project and address any members' questions?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to point out for both these 2 bond resolutions, following on Tim's ARRA presentation, the Division of Bond Finance and the 2 universities are certainly looking very closely at using the Build America bond provision of the ARRA. So the language in here allows for that. If at the time of issuance, that's the best rate, they'll use those provisions. So it's not referenced, but I thought the committee would like to know that. So the first one is a wellness center for Florida State University. It will replace the existing student facility, which some know as Thagard Student Health Center. This is going to will support the operations of the health center, the College of Nursing, and campus recreation. So this is a project that's funded not just with bonds, but also what's in PICO that's been previously appropriated. It is in conformity with the debt guidelines, and I have no features to point out.
Any questions for Tim regarding the first bond resolution? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Great, thank you very much. The next item, Chris?
Thank you very much. This is a parking garage at the University of Central Florida. It's a multi-level parking garage consisting of approximately 1,400 spaces to provide general campus parking. And so this is their 6th garage. It's a fixed rate deal. It's in conformity with the guidelines. It will be issued by the Division of Bond Finance, and I have no unique features to point out.
Any questions for Chris regarding this resolution? There being none, I'll accept the motion at this time. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you very much. The next item we have on it is item number 4, which is a review and approval of the 2010-2011 SUS fixed capital outlay legislative budget request. Chris, you want to take that, please?
Yes, I'd be glad to do that. And as you pointed out in your opening remarks, we have much reduced PICO funding, and of course we did not receive any matching gift funds last year from the legislature, but we do still have a budget to approve, much as with the operating budget, and I'll go through this if you would. The 8 parts of the budget, there's attachments 1 through 8, I believe, and I'll go through this as quickly as possible and be glad to address any questions. The first, just to, again, have the overall picture, if we look at Exhibit A, you can see that for the last year, our appropriation was $130 million of total PICO. This year, the estimate provides $56 million. It does return to a more normal level in 11-12, and then in 12-13, it appears to kind of an average level, $281 million. That's Exhibit A on page 29. Exhibit B just lists out the last year, and then the average is Exhibit C. Getting to the first action item is Attachment 1, starting on page 34. And what we see here in the middle column for 10-11 is the allocation of the $36 million in funding for PICO projects. What staff has done here, working with university staff, is took the amount we had allocated available, $36 million, and provided each university its average based on a 10-year average of PICO appropriations, and have put it into the utilities infrastructure capital renewal line. So no new projects are on the list. The one that's at all different is FAU, that has $2 million for scripts. They receive the same allocation amount as the other institutions, but that's an already existing legal commitment that they felt was their top priority. So other than that, we've received no real feedback from the universities since there's no new projects in the year 1. In year 11-12, we begin to allocate, again, most of it towards utility infrastructure, with really new projects starting, as sort of we've seen in years past, in that third year. But given what we know about PICO, right now we're focused solely on year 10-11.
Any questions for Mr. Kinsley? I guess the one comment that I have is that I'm really glad that we have something in place that's going to ensure that even in lean times, what dollars we have go for remodeling, repairs, and essential maintenance. You know, so often whenever we don't have a lot of money, it seems that we kind of forget about those things that we have to do to ensure the viability of our institution. So I'm just happy to see that. So if there being no questions for Chris, at this time I entertain a motion to adopt the LBR and authorize the chancellor to make technical changes. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Did you? You're only going through one
I
section.
have to cover Cortellis.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just thought about that. I apologize. I got ahead of myself. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, board members. Attachment 2 is PICO prioritized. Attachment 3 is the formula PICO dollars that we just basically passed through to universities. But in this year, that $19 million is very significant. Attachment 4, starting on page 43, is the Cortellis list. We have $113 million worth of projects as of August 1st. That will continue, I believe, to build. It has in all years past. So by December, we'll probably have a bigger request. I don't know, $120 million, $130 million of Cortellis matching. And moving then to, and that's a non-prioritized list. We are required to adopt a prioritized Cortellis list, but we'll do that in the final Cortellis list in January when we have our last opportunity to amend the LBR. Moving to attachment 6 is the plant operations and maintenance appropriation requests. These are facilities that may be constructed from non-appropriated sources but may be used for E&G purposes. So these are just things the universities may or may not construct and in future years may ask for funding for. And this is just part of the LBR process. Attachment 7 is our debt service on the Capital Improvement Trust Fund. This is the debt service for the capital improvement projects, so that's sort of a mandatory request. And then finally on page 59, I want to point out, we have two more. On page 59 is concurrency. We'll cover this more in the legislative agenda, but we believe that the concurrency trust fund funding will be exhausted in this fiscal year, and so we are looking to point out that we are going to need an appropriation of some kind to continue to meet the board's obligations and the state university system's obligations to fund the campus development agreements. This $15 million represents our best estimate of what that need would be for the 10-11 year. So this is just a straight general revenue request. And then the last is attachment 9. Because of the reduced PICO appropriations, we gave each university the opportunity to request reappropriation of prior year funds to other projects. And New College and Florida State University have taken advantage of that opportunity at this time and request some minor reappropriations of funding to complete projects. And with that, that concludes the LBR presentation. Thank you.
I apologize to you, Chris, for getting ahead of myself.
Madam Chair.
Chancellor Brogan.
Just a quick thank you to not only Chris, but the folks at the university level. Of course, no one was happy about the availability of PICO funding for the coming year, but we quickly got past it for what it is and began to work on a distribution model that I really believe people think is as fair as it can be. We used, as mentioned, that 10-year average, and while no one got the amount of money that made them happy, you made the comment, Chairwoman made the comment, that we prioritized ongoing projects. We did not want to see unfinished buildings, shell buildings sitting out there. And so not only going forward, but as Chris has mentioned, the ability to use unused money for furniture, for finishing off some projects. I think we have captured out there with all of the universities the ability to move forward with what's available this year, as tough as it's going to be.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? I guess the one comment that I have, I know that we had this discussion last year when we talked about the LBR. As it relates to the Cortellis matching grants, that means that for the monies that I guess that are being requested on our list, that at this point the universities just have other monies just sitting and waiting until we get the matching?
I would say for the most part that is correct. And I'm aware of one or two projects the legislature provided authority. They made a change to 101379 to allow a university to move forward if it had all the private money in hand and had other sources that it could use to complete the project and still be able to go back to the legislature. So only in cases where the university has all funding available can it move forward with the Cortellis project. But those are a handful of projects. I think I'm aware of maybe 2, 3 across the entire, we have, I believe, about, no, we don't have a total on here, about 50 or 60 projects right now.
Well, I mean, it looks like between the Cortellis and the other general matching program, we've got about $255 million sitting there. Is that about right?
Yes, ma'am.
And this is in private money. Are any of the universities getting any pushback from donors?
Yes.
I've got two nods. Anybody else? No?
Madam Chair, if you couple this issue with a flagging economy that we've been facing, the donor base is becoming problematic based on both of those variables. People just don't have as much money.
But looking for ways to get it back too, perhaps.
And this is yeah, exactly.
But you'd be creating a lot of jobs if you could get that money moving.
Start putting buildings in the ground.
Are there any other universities? Can somebody just raise your hand? I got 2 nods. Have we got 3 nods? Anybody else having problems? 4, 5? Is everybody having problems? Anybody not having problems? Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I think it's important. That's part of the message, because you can't, if you're not going to be able to hold on to that money, it's not in the best interest overall if we get some non-recurring money available.
And if I might, Madam Chair, the other problem you have is at some point, if it continues for multiple years, the lack of confidence on the part of the donor that it's ever going to be funded, because it's a snowball effect, and it gets bigger and bigger, and donors start to wonder, when you explain this system to them, if we'll ever come up with enough money to fully fund and therefore catch up with their projects.
Well, they signed something, don't they, Frank?
They do.
That talks about it being subject to and for a certain period of time. So we have to worry about those things. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. No, please.
I wondered what your general sense on this Cortellis issue. For those of you that are very close to the legislature, what is your sense of the legislature of funding some of the Cortellis, maybe starting just on top of the list and going down maybe 10 or 15 projects? Because it is an issue of faith and confidence. It's also an issue of jobs. I mean, if this is what our legislative leaders want, is to make jobs, almost all of these projects will create jobs. What's your sense of how it's going to go?
Yes, sir, Brogan.
I'll have a much better idea about that after next week. Next week is committee week, and
Yes.
we'll have the legislature in town and have the opportunity to have a lot of these conversations. You know, it's a classic case of we don't have the money, and I understand that. But at some point, some decisions have to be made on this because it is a growing, snowballing problem that is not going to go away.
Well, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
Judy, or President Benz, I think that you were around us enough last year we talked about this quite a bit in the legislature, and I've had a few just, casual type conversations. I think everybody recognizes the seriousness of it. It's just how many non-recurring dollars are there and what else is vying for them. And so we've just got to make our case, just like with everything else. But it is a big issue for the system, and it would, as you say, create some jobs pretty quickly if we could get the shovels moving. And if those people are going to be able to take back their money, we want to worry about it.
Deborah Duncan?
Do we know, are we pretty confident they are shovel-ready, or are they just, you're waiting to get started to even start planning and design? Can we confidently say they're imminent jobs, or is it all over the board, or where does it fall in that respect?
Well,
It's all over.
Probably
Combo,
across the board.
right.
You've got some that have been sitting there for a while where they've actually done work, architectural, et cetera. And you've got others where the gift just was committed and everything in between. So you've probably got a little of everything out there.
I do think some of, Janet or Rick, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of what was adopted last year does allow certain planning, even if they don't have the rest of the money.
That's correct.
I guess I'm just wondering, is it worth it to have somebody on our team put together the economic impact?
Yeah.
Have it with some credibility.
Sort of a shovel-ready project list.
And kind of be teed up there, and even maybe be looking at some of the state grants on some of the other stuff.
Chris, can we survey the universities and find out what they consider to be shovel-ready? And we can define that as appropriate, obviously. But.
Yes, we'd certainly be glad to do it, because I know it does vary. The range is exactly right. Some are for equipment. The building's already built, but it's just for a specialized piece of maybe laboratory equipment, or maybe it's for a wing, to finish out a wing of a building that's already constructed. So it's beyond shovel-ready. It's some of the finishing work, where some may not have yet gone to planning. So we could kind of find out what the range is.
Well, remember, we're looking at jobs here.
Yes.
Well, and I guess just trying to be mindful of unintended consequences of that request. What does that, because I guess just what would that do, the prioritization of the funding and going down the list, because they might jump on shovel-ready over pecking order, and I guess we just need to think through what those ramifications might be if we did that.
I think what I would like to see is that it seems that we should be able to solicit the help of the donors to help us get the message across. And maybe we've done that, but it seems to me that likely those folks who've had enough, who have the dollars to actually, give this kind of a gift to university, are probably folks who also give to campaigns. And it may be that they may be very influential in our attempts to ensure that universities get the dollars. So if there's some sort of way we can kind of organize that effort, that's just a thought, and certainly we rely upon the chair and her guidance and the chancellor to see if that makes sense. But I think we have some willing spokespeople out there who probably have not been alerted yet that we need their help in trying to get this problem solved. So just a thought. Any other questions regarding the LBR? Okay, now that Chris has gone through his entire presentation, now entertain a motion to adopt the LBR and authorize the chancellor to make any technical changes. Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We'll now move on to item number 5, which is to approve the 2010 Facilities Legislative Agenda. Mr. Kinsley.
Thank you very much, Ms. Parker. Again, this is on page 61 of your packet of the Facilities Committee. We have 4 items: the capital improvement fee, concurrency, minor projects threshold, and property insurance. And the first 3 are all issues that have been considered by this committee and our board last year. And we had some, I'll give you a little brief history of where we ended up last year on each of those first 3 issues. On the capital improvement fee, this is a fee that's assessed to each student. It's the building fee and capital improvement fee. It's a total of $4.76 per credit hour, and it's been the same since 1988, is what my records indicate. We did adopt this as an increase to the fee. This language mirrors the community college language, so that was a starting point. We were able to get legislation introduced but it did not make it all the way through the process. So again, the driver behind this is the fact that in the years past, our enrollment growth was so strong that we were able to basically bond on the growth. As our enrollment has flattened and lessened, the revenue stream is not there to bond. It's very similar to what's happened with the PICO bonds. You have to have new revenues, just as with a parking system or any other. New revenue creates new bond funds. So that's what's from a finance standpoint, what's driving it. Practically speaking, with your permission, we have with us Dr. Patricia Tellis-Irvin from the University of Florida, and she's here to speak about what are some of the benefits. What does it practically mean on this issue? So, hey, Dr. Irvin, speak.
Please.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
I have the honor, I guess, a privilege to have to be the chair of the Council of Vice Presidents for Student Affairs. And so that's how I'm speaking on behalf of the Vice Presidents. And this is an issue that we have been addressing for many years, and that's the CITF funding. The practice has been to use these funds for non-academic facilities, by and large. I've been in the system for about 16 years, and by and large, we've been using it, for example, for housing, for unions, for career centers, counseling, health centers, et cetera. And we believe that these facilities are very important not only to the students, but certainly for recruitment and retention of our students at each of the local universities. And I have served both at FIU and also at UF right now. And we have a very good process by which we include our students not only to sit at the table and decide and think about the best projects that these funds should be dedicated to, but also in encouraging other students to come forth with their ideas. The biggest challenge certainly is as construction has increased, probably doubled since 1988, which was the last time that this fee was increased, it doesn't give us a lot of possibilities when it comes to building. So we have been trying to encourage that the fee itself, the 244, be raised and give us that opportunity to really build in a substantive way and plan ahead as universities would like to do. So that is a challenge, and I know that we have a unanimous support by the vice presidents. I know that my student body president, Jordan Johnson, is in full support of this increase, and I know that the vice presidents are also asking their own respective presidents at each of the universities. So we're hoping that this will go forward because, by the way, it would also create more jobs. There you go. Any questions?
Any questions? Governor Tripp?
I have a question more probably to the board than I do to that presentation. I constantly have an issue.
Can you get a little bit closer to your mic,
Frank's
Governor
going to hear
Tripp?
me say this.
Get a little bit closer to your mic, Governor Tripp.
I'm sorry. I think it's a big issue for the university system when we talk about fees, and we always talk about them one at a time. And we don't put them all down at the same time so we see the total impact on the person who has to pay the fees. And I struggled with this mightily when I was a trustee at FAU and caused them to have to come to us on a yearly basis and say, you know, when you see all of the fees that universities charge students, there's a myriad number of fees. Just raising this one $1 or $2 a credit hour, and then we go to the residential and we raise that another $1 or $2 a credit hour, and then we go to the parking and we raise that another $1 or $2 a credit hour, and then we're going to have a presentation here on health care, and we're only going to raise that another $10 or $15 an hour, and on and on and on. We don't get to see the full impact of it as a board. And so while this sounds good, and well, I don't think we have a problem right now with retention. You know, I know it's nice to build more wellness centers and to do a lot of things when the flow is there and we can do it. But I don't see us having a problem with students leaving the University of Florida or Florida State, et cetera, because they don't have enough facilities, they don't like it. So some of that I understand is good, and it may create some jobs, but I have to say again that we've just put a tuition differential fee on. You know, every year we're taxing our students more and more and more. And so I have a concern about these fees, and when they're in the abstract, I'd like to see us a presentation about how many fees are we going to talk about this year, and then see the total impact, and then decide as a board, you know, which ones can we afford, we being the students that have to pay it, and which ones can't we afford.
I almost want to look to my right.
I just want to say that couldn't agree with you more on everything you're saying there. That's been an issue across the SUS system, that the student body presidents have felt the same way about fees on top of fees. The taxing to death of students is what it seems like a lot of times, and specifically with CITF. And I can say that over the summer for our planning conference with the Florida Student Association, when we had 10 of the 11 student body presidents present at the time, all 10 of them agreed that they would only support an increase with CITF if the language was written in that the student body president had signature authority on it. Currently, as it states that the president of the university only has to consult with the student body president, but all of the student body presidents came to the agreement that they would support this because it's been such a long time since an increase if the student body president had equal sign authority with the university president. That's the stance of the 10 student body presidents, the whole FSA. That was what we agreed on this summer. And at the same time, on a personal note, I completely agree with what you're saying about the fees on top of fees.
Governor Solano?
I have a question that I think goes along with this issue. I thought I recalled that there was some percentage limit beyond which you could not increase fees. Can anybody answer that question for me?
Can you respond to that, Chris?
Yeah, on this fee is set. There is no limit. It's a statutorily prescribed. It's in two parts, but it totals $4.76, and there is no reference to limit. I could have Tim speak to the A&S fees. I believe you might be speaking of.
I guess. Well, then my question. First of all, I thought there was something about a limit.
Yeah, Governor Solomon, there
does
is.
This one fit in?
Yeah.
But this one
Not
doesn't
with this.
fit under
No.
there. Okay.
Governor Barnes, you want to?
I was just going to say that's with athletics, student health, and
So
A&S.
all the other ones, there's sort of a cap.
There's a cap for a certain
But this
piece.
is separate from that.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, the
So that may
caps are
respond
there,
to
but
Governor
we keep
Tripp's
changing
concern.
the caps because it comes up next week and we vote on that one.
No, it's
We
a percent.
keep increasing the fees. They do at the Board of Trustee level. I mean, they come up in various times, residential fees, whatever, and we don't see them as a broad impact. Till the end of the year, we say, gee, you know, this is getting expensive.
So I guess in order to respond to Governor Tripp's concern, Chancellor Brogan, it may be effective of us to have some kind of a chart that kind of shows where we are as it relates to the increasing fees, and kind of add it all together so we kind of have some idea. And I think it also would be helpful for which ones actually fall into this category of it can't go beyond a certain limit, and those which are outside that category, so we kind of know exactly what we're doing when we do
I
it.
think it would be very helpful to have a good discussion on fees. We talk about tuition, obviously, and we should, a great deal. But we at FAU began a large conversation also about fees and the way fees are presented and discussed and participated in. At some point, a good conversation about just fees would probably be not only very helpful to the board, but I think raise the comfort level of the board as to how they're being approached. So we'll be glad to coordinate that.
Now I have a
Governor
second
Tripp?
question.
Sure.
We say we haven't raised the fee since '88. Now,
Correct.
haven't some of the projects that we funded and bonded with those fees, haven't they been paid off? So don't we have those fees to be able to go forward in the future? Or are we?
Well,
we
yeah,
use
we're
these
looking. No, I
fees-
could I
We use
speak to
these
it?
fees to support the bonding of projects that we built, right?
But we haven't done that.
Well, that's then 21 years. I mean, some of those have been paid off, haven't they?
Could I speak to that question?
Please, Mr.
Thank you. Yeah, the way this debt is structured is with level debt, meaning I believe in 11-12, we pay off the next line of debt. So when that happens in 12-13, we will have some funding available. It won't be, the last appropriation was a total, we end up issuing $60 million of debt. I don't think it will support $60 million. It might support, off the top of my head, 20 or 30 million. As we pay off those old bonds, certainly, we will be able to issue new debt out 4 years, 5 years, 6 years from today. I think the reason this was on the table is the universities, historically on this, we've issued new debt for new projects every 3 to 4 years. We will not be able to continue on that cycle. It's going to be 5 or 6 years out.
My issue then, and that's why I wanted you to say that, this is an improper presentation. We need to have a chart to show us the history of the funding, what's going to be coming up, so we can look at these numbers and we can make a determined decision whether or not it makes sense. I mean, the presentation was, oh, all hell's gone, you know, and we don't have any money. And nobody said anything about, well, there's 30 million coming up, or there's in 5 years there's 50 million, and we haven't really seen any presentation out there of what are the needs, what's been stacked back so we're not doing it. We're in tough times right now. We just got through talking about the fact that we don't know, okay, how we're going to get some of this other stuff, and now we got a candy list here. So I think we need to know, see that lineup. When are those bonds going to go off? When is money going to be available? What projects do people think they'd like to be doing? How would that fit in? Then we could make an honest decision about whether we should be charging our students more money.
So in light of Governor Tripp's request, is that he wants additional background information in support of this item, I think is what he's looking for. It seems that he feels that we don't have enough data in order to make an informed decision about whether it makes sense to now add an additional fee at this point, even though it hasn't been raised in several years. Because to his credit, he says just, you know, these bonds, you know, after a while the bonds are paid off, and if more is coming down, we can kind of have a better idea of what exactly we may need to pay for some of the items that are coming forward.
Yeah, and we'll certainly be glad as staff to provide that for the board. We have all that data information, and I believe what happened, since this was a continuation issue from the previous year, much of that data had been in packets previously, and we should have carried that forward. So I do apologize for that, and we will move that forward so that the committee can look at it in a broader context.
Yeah, I want to say it seems like it may have been a meeting that maybe we had at FAMU where we had more detail about that particular item. So I know we have it, Governor Tripp. We'll just make sure that the information is made available for the board. Provost Abel?
Just to put it in context, it's an excellent suggestion and idea. That said, we add tuition and fees, even with the differential. The state of Florida remains the lowest in the United States. And if you break out our fees in a national comparison, we are, as well as tuition, we're providing an incredible amount of services through the hard work of faculty and staff for a very low amount. And even if you turn it out as the Lumina Foundation did last week on what we, 2 weeks ago, invest in, what's the return on investment, the state of Florida is still lowest in the country by a significant amount. So lots of things have happened since '88. Steel's more expensive, cement's more expensive. So when we do it, I think we need to have a context both locally and nationally as to what we are able to provide our students. CTF money or CTIF money is providing for our wellness center. That our center was built when we had 15,000 students. We now have 40,000, and it's not surprising that students simply expect more services than they did 20 years ago. They want a lot of services on campus, and as more students live on campus, there's a lot of pressure to provide those. So I hope that when we get this information, there's also a national context at the same time.
Governor Barnes? Yes, please.
I believe that the students understand that in the state of Florida, understand that there's only 2 or 3 states in the entire country that they could go to that would if they lived in state, that would be a cheaper education. I believe that they understand that, and they're grateful for it. At the same time, going off of what Governor Tripp said, I think that it seems like an avalanche, if you will, at this time. You know, during one of the worst economic times, I mean, as everyone knows how hard things are economically, so many students say, wow, you know, I mean, they're finally beginning to really look at that fee. When you pay your tuition online or wherever you pay, there's a list of fees, the athletic fee and the health fee and all the different fees that students might not have been aware of in the past. They're counting those. They're counting those nickels and those dimes and those pennies. And I think that Governor Tripp is just making some great points that it just seems like we're doing a lot of this all at once, specifically with differential coming when it, you know, we all understand why it did. But coming when it did during these incredibly hard times, students are saying, wow, every time I turn around, I'm getting an increase on my fees. You know, so I think that while, of course, it's been 20 plus years since it's been raised, right now students are just hesitant for any increases anywhere.
My only point was to put it in a context, not that, I mean, I've seen the, last year we had 790, quote, emergency financial aids. For the whole year, we've had 640 in the last 2 months. So a lot of people are feeling the stress.
And Madam Chair, if I might, I think context is the key here. I think what I heard
I'm only
is,
trying to get it into context, and I would like to see all of the fees we propose to charge all of the students in the state of Florida come to us, and we can say, because it's not $10 or $20, it's hundreds of dollars, okay, when we add it up. And I'd like us to vote on it, as our Board of Trustees had to vote on it, and say, we are willing to look the students in the eye and say, this is in your best interest, and we're going to charge it to you. That's the whole point. You may be right, but, you know, I can argue with you and say construction costs are down now, because when we're seeing bids coming in, there's no jobs, so they're bidding them 20% less. That's not the issue. I think the real issue is, for me, is getting them lined up so we can have an honest discussion about which ones we should go forward with, how they will impact the students that we're dealing with in this context.
Dr. Hitt.
I really think what Governor Tripp is asking for is very, very good. I just would also think it would be good to provide as context comparison of what we buy for $8 an hour versus what we bought in the mid-'80s when this came on stream. I think also we need to understand that for newer, faster-growing universities, there's a little bit of a different circumstance than there might be for some of the more established and more mature institutions, so that a Florida Gulf Coast institution might feel pressure from their students for more and better facilities a little differently than even we would after 40-some years. So institutions that are growing fast and are younger probably feel this a little more than do some of the more mature institutions. But I do think the context is important, and I certainly agree with your suggestion.
Dr. Solano, did you have something?
I don't disagree with a lot of what Governor Tripp has said, but not all of these fees come to us for approval. It's the trustees, and I do appreciate this notion of trying to get a hold of the bigger picture, but I don't think I support them all coming to us for approval, because that takes it out of the hands of the individual boards of trustees.
I did not say approval.
Oh, I thought that's what you were implying. Sorry.
I said I would like to see what a student pays on a yearly basis. And what we're talking about, it's just a simple thing, you know. If you got 20 items, let's see them at one time.
You're going to have to look at them by university, because they're all different.
And I can tell you, FAU's has a big athletic fee.
Yeah,
okay.
University
of Florida has a small one because they make so much money. I'm not trying to be negative on anything, but I'm just trying to say that, you know, in the context of it, now is a good time to kind of understand when we're doing this. financial impact.
I do agree with that. I misunderstood. I thought you were...
That's the key. I think what we're talking about is not changing the system. It is just providing information for both context and education. I think it's a good time to say, what are all the fees out there? Who is responsible, Governor, for setting which fees, which are statutorily provided for, which are optional fees, and maybe what we can do is also take a few universities and just use that in a matrix. I know at FAU, and it's what I know, we use a 5-year matrix so that board members now can see every fee and what it was for the last 5 years. And that gives them a much better understanding when they're looking at the next year as to how they want to approach it, and if they want to approach it for an increase, and an increase of what kind. So I think it would be not only good context, I think it would be helpful from an education standpoint for the board to see all the fees and what they are and how they've gotten to be over time.
Governor Chavez?
Chancellor's comments. There's no doubt that we should have this information. At the same time, I always worry about, like, bright futures. If we're helping students who are in need, or are we not helping students in need? And those are the students that I worry about, the ones who really have a financial problem, and they can't afford the extra fees, even though they're the lowest fees in the country. That's something that concerns me.
So what I'm hearing, Mr. Kinsley, so you can kind of get this together, is that we try to find some way to establish some kind of recognition of all the fees that are currently in place, the ones that we're adding to, and find some sort of way to also identify the fact that the fees may vary by university because the trustees also have some authorization power as well. So if there's some way to kind of show the fees that may have been passed on individually by the universities, by their boards of trustees, as well as fees that have been passed by the Board of Governors, that would be helpful. In addition to that, in response to Dr. Abel's concerns, it would be interesting to put that all in a national perspective as well. So I'm asking a lot, but if you can find a way to condense that to 2 pages.
As an accountant, that's just like, throw me in that briar patch. I'll be glad to go there. I think we can put that together in very short order, working with Tim Jones on the operating type fees. We'll provide that information to you and then to the committee. And then I know our next committee meeting, I don't believe, is scheduled to December, but perhaps, we might have like a conference call as we did last fall to cover that, to get into it in more depth and detail than we might have today.
That would be a good idea. I do want to ask Governor Barnes a question, because what I thought I heard you say is that the 11 presidents have gotten together and said, yeah, we think it's a good idea to have this increase in fees, but only if the presidents can come back and have signature authority for what the money is spent on. So is your problem what the money is being spent on, or is your problem that we don't like the fee?
Speaking for all of the student body presidents,
Sure.
The problem has been that, the language says that the university president must consult the student body president. And a lot of times in the past, I'm sure none of the university presidents here, but a long time ago, they'll come and say, John, we are consulting you that we're using the CITF money for this, and whether or not that we consulted you. So that's what the student body presidents want to be able to have sign authority with the university presidents on that. And if that were the case, if that were to happen through legislation, the students would be in full support of increasing the CITF fee.
Okay. So it's not the money, but the use. That's what I'm hearing.
At the same time, we, just like Governor Tripp's been saying, because there's so many fees being increased, we don't want to see a fee increase without something besides just a fee increase involved with it. We're willing to take the hit of a fee increase if we are able to have sign authority as well.
Okay. Mr. Kinsley?
Thank you, Governor Parker. Well, we will then, I believe, may I continue to the next item?
Yeah, I know. We kind of got off on a tangent there. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And I will do my best to be brief on this. Concurrency, I believe the committee is familiar with concurrency. As you know, the statute provides for a university to pay its fair share of the impact of development. It doesn't have to pay development fees as a private developer would, but the statutes recognize the value universities have to the community, but also the need to pay for its share of the impact on roads, transportation, runoff, all those type of development mitigation type impacts. That's been paid for through the mechanism of the concurrency trust fund. 2 years ago, the trust fund, the revenue stream that had been previously dedicated for the trust fund, was redirected to transportation. We've been basically living off the balance in the trust fund. The trust fund will be exhausted this current fiscal year, and then when a university negotiates, as required by law, a campus development agreement, we won't have the funding to pay for the campus development agreement. I don't know the ultimate solution of that, but we do basically have some language in here to redirect some revenues into concurrency trust fund, to at least as a board recognize that there's a problem, that we have a statute that requires us to pay for these mitigation costs, but we don't have any way of doing that. I believe that I don't know what will happen if we don't find a fund source. I don't know if it will fall back on the individual projects to kind of go as pay as you go. I just simply don't know.
Madam Chair?
Is Chancellor Brogan?
When you are attempting to do these projects in a community and there are concurrency impacts that are worked out and agreed to, the beauty, obviously, of having the trust fund for so long is the fact that it is and has been a place you could go to pull down some of these funds and make available. So if you have to widen a road and you're responsible for that, if you have to put in some kind of lines and you're responsible for that, these costs can be $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, $10 million. If there is no place to go via the trust fund, then the only place to go is back into our PICO revenues, which obviously has the net effect of squeezing the air in a balloon. It's got to come out somewhere in your projects. So this is one of those that has gotten to the pivotal point where it's been around a long time. We've taken good advantage of it, I think, for a long time, but it is, as Chris mentioned, about to run out. And I think that the legislature is going to need to look at this one, because this is a case where the legislature is paying one way or the other. They're either paying it in concurrency trust fund, or they are going to end up paying it with money that they allocate to us already in our construction pot. So it really is one I think we need to look at. It's reached the point where within a year it's gone. It's not like it is petering out. It will be gone, and we really need to work with them to see if we can get our arms around it.
Dr. Hitt, you have any comment on that?
As I recall, the host county of the campus has to sign off that they have agreed on concurrency, or you can't proceed.
Correct.
With the project. So they don't really have to do anything other than hold it.
Right.
And so you could have a situation where you're holding up a badly needed project for want of the millions of dollars it might be in concurrency. The project can be entirely on the campus. It might not involve anything off campus, but it might increase number of trips on and off the campus, any number of factors.
It could hold up projects significantly. The deal breaker is usually over concurrency costs, and once concurrency is negotiated forward, then these joint proposals, campus master plans, and the host county can find resolution to it. If these funds are not available, it could truly stifle a good project from being forwarded. If you take an example of putting in a medical center on a campus, that has significant impact to the community. Many more trips on and off campus from the community, therefore road impacts, traffic light impacts, turn lanes. And if the concurrency trust fund money isn't there to support the university's obligation to pay some of that, then the entire project could be held up. The alternative is, as mentioned, to go the only other place you really could, which would be directly to the PICO pot, which would have obviously a negative impact on your construction, especially with PICO the way it is today.
Chris, what is Chapter 198? Because it's referring to taxes and fees levied and collected under that chapter. What kind of taxes and fees are we talking about?
Excuse me, ma'am. I just glossed right over that. I just was thrown, I guess, by the previous CITF discussion. That is the federal estate tax.
Well, you can't get, if you can get thrown over that, then you're in deep trouble.
I probably am in deep trouble. So probably the longer I'm up here, the better. But anyway.
No.
That is the federal estate tax. It's currently subject to expire, I believe, in January 1st of 2011.
Right.
And so the state EDR has projected that it will generate, I don't know, $500 million a year if everything stays as is, if the feds don't take any action and we don't.
That makes this a lot clearer.
Thank you.
Better late than never.
Are there any questions from Mr. Kinsley regarding the concurrency item? Go ahead to, I guess, the
Okay,
minor
this,
project threshold.
this is the easiest one to explain.
I'm sorry, Governor Trip has a question.
Could I ask a question?
No, please.
It sort of sounded, and I know it's not true, like any university can go out and decide on any project and deal with any county and have millions of dollars owed on concurrency. Now, who gets to approve before they get into that?
We approve them here. They come
I just
here.
wanted that to be a point. Those projects have already been through the process and approved.
Yes.
That's a part of the approved campus master plan
Yeah,
development.
so we actually
CDA.
know which ones that have been approved and how much money is outstanding or whatever. So, so that it could, because I just wanted the record not to sound like we don't have any idea,
Right.
What that is. We really know what it is, so we know this fund is going to run out because we know what we've approved.
We do.
Yeah.
Any other questions regarding this item? If not, go ahead to the third item, the minor project threshold.
Yes, and there's several statutory references to a minor project threshold of $1 million. The Florida legislature, we adopted a change, it came from the universities, to increase it to $2 million. In some references, the legislature did increase that to $2 million. In fact, when we get to the regulations, we're conforming some of our regulations to match the legislative change that we had requested. But the legislature did not change all references to the $1 million threshold, so that we have some statutory inconsistency. So this is more in the nature of a technical change to say, let's change all the references to the $1 million threshold to $2 million across the board. And this was requested by the universities.
Any questions on item number 3? Go to item number 4.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item is more of a discussion item, and I know we may not have time for that today, but I'll say that up front. On our property insurance, this is the insurance for our buildings and the contents of our buildings. It's covered through a self-insurance program managed by the State Division of Risk Management. It's a division within the State Chief Financial Officer's office. And they have issued a white paper describing some of the challenges that this program is facing. And it starts on page 68. And I believe what they're recognizing is that the state, even for a self-insurance program, appears to be inadequately covered. We have about $90 million of coverage available, immediately available through what's in a self-insurance trust fund and through reinsurance. $90 million for all state buildings and all university property, when we see that the values of, say, a typical university facility to construct today might be in $20, $30, $40, $50 million. So $90 million does not seem adequate. That's what's pointed out in this report by the state experts at Risk Management. We don't yet have statutory language. We're waiting for the state CFO's office to come out and say what language they're going to recommend. But this is more in the matter of saying recommend the universities. Madam Chair.
No, you can finish. I just have a whole series of questions when you get finished.
The universities for several years have received audit criticisms from the Auditor General for not covering their contents and their buildings at the proper valuation. What that proper valuation is, they don't say. I believe it should be replacement value, as you would have on your own property. That's what's available commercially. That's not how the state insurance program works. I believe this is a concern certainly of all the CFOs, but I believe all the university presidents as well, particularly those who are located very near to the coast. So this addresses that there is a problem. It may not be the solution. We may want to pursue something with the state CFO as well as explore other possibilities, but to at least, recognize this as an area that's a critical concern.
Madam Chair.
Okay. What, do you know offhand what the deductible is under this particular scheme?
The deductible, I know for buildings is, I don't know. I know it's very low. I think it's $5,000 or $10,000.
Okay. And, I mean, I guess that's the trade-off for not getting enough money to be able to replace it. But the other question, do you know whether or not the university system is mandated by law to participate in this state risk pool, or does it have the ability to look at other alternatives, creating its own risk pool, pooling with community colleges, or going out and looking at commercial insurance?
Currently, the universities are mandated to participate. The university property is considered state-owned property.
Because it's under the trustees of the Internal Improvement Fund.
Yes, or through state appropriate. Now, the community colleges do have specific statutory authority that has allowed them to set up a risk consortium, and we are also looking at that model.
Well, the other thing is, I would like, I mean, if everybody in the state isn't going to go crazy, I would like to take a look at some alternatives. I think that we should be looking at where we can get the most bang for our buck and protect the assets the best for the least price. And I'm not certain that we even have evaluated what we've got. I mean, I know that you got some preliminary information that I had asked you for. I mean, we are paying, almost $7 million in premiums to the state self-insurance fund. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we are in the process with the CFO. They've polled all the agencies, including universities, say what would be the replacement cost of the property. And I believe as of last week, all the universities have replied with the replacement cost. Some had to get assessments. Some have done their best to, do their best estimate of replacement costs.
Well, what percentage is the university system of all of the participants in that risk pool? Do you know?
I don't know. I'll have to get you that answer.
Well, do you think we could do a project, Madam Chair, that might take a look at some of these alternatives? I mean, not to say that we're going to do anything and create a big brouhaha, but I think we ought to look at what alternatives we might have available.
I was going to say, I'm happy for this committee to do it, but shared
It
services,
could be something.
shared services has already started that with Tim.
Okay, well
We've got
then
both.
go ahead.
We are on it. We're trying to work through some of that, and we've actually had some discussions with the CFO's office on the issue as well.
All right, well then just coordinate.
I'm happy to.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think it properly would go in shared services because it would be.
Yeah, it's the risk pool issue that I think you're trying to get to.
And I'm trying to see if you can
the
look
CIPs and all of that.
and if you can get something commercially that makes better sense.
Yeah.
And you kind of shift the risk because it takes all kinds of people to manage these things.
Absolutely.
As well.
And unfortunately, one of the challenges just will be some of our institutions in lower risk areas are not really excited about sharing the risk with higher risk.
Well,
I mean, I understand.
I understand that, but they may not have, I mean, that issue could be mitigated in a commercial setting as opposed to being in the pool.
Madam Chair, what we do know now is what we're doing doesn't work.
Right.
And the frustration that the universities have, and I've been there, is you can't pass audit muster with it the way it is right now. So you get written up by the auditors, and you try to explain to them, we can only do what we are prescribed to be able to do. And then you explain to the legislature who says, what do you mean all of your buildings aren't fully insured with the contents? And you explain to them that in part it's legislation that precludes that from happening. So you get into this revolving wheel. And that's why I think it's a good idea to look at, either to change the legislation or to go back and look at other alternatives that might put us in a better posture as a free agent.
One of the things that really strikes me is that we have all different kinds of structures within this system. Take, for example, the University of Florida. We just gave them $1 bazillion worth of historical buildings that have to be treated differently, and they have to be insured differently. Well, I mean, I don't know who gave them to them. Somebody gave them to them. But, I mean, I'm just pointing out that they now have responsibility for a unique type of building. I think UWF has some of the same ones. Yeah, you have quite, and so you have to look at those very differently than you do a classroom building that you just built 5 years ago and all that. So I don't think that's being done.
And I think, Chair McDevitt, one of the things that we've kind of encouraged to look at is when you have like pools like that. I mean, just we don't necessarily have to be one size fit all. There may be some other natural savings of bringing people together where it still makes sense. And so we are trying to look at it rather holistically. But it is complicated, but it's important because it's big dollars. The indications are at this point.
I suspect we're probably.
Ken, you're shaking your head so much. Yeah, you and I got to get together because I need you guys to help more.
Any more comments on this item? That's your last item for this, right?
Yes, that concludes a very challenging legislative agenda.
What I would propose, based upon the comments that we've received today and based upon the fact that we have some time, it seems that we didn't get much, we seem to be in an agreement as it relates to the concurrency item as well as the minor projects threshold. So what I recommend that as a committee that we would go ahead and move forward the minor projects threshold and the concurrency item, and that based upon our concerns about additional information that we wait until we get additional information regarding the CITF, and that we also maybe consider whether or not the property insurance item should come from our committee, maybe from another committee, but that we not pass that at this time either. So if kind of looking around to make sure we're all on the same page, I'd entertain a motion to move forward on our legislative agenda for the Boggs adoption tomorrow, item number 2 on concurrency and item number 3 on minor projects threshold.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. With the understanding that the other 2 items are not necessarily off the agenda, but that we're going to get more information on CITF, so we have that prior to December, and that we're going to consider, based upon the chair's direction, whether she wants to continue the property insurance item and stay with us, or whether she go to Governor Duncan and the shared services. Okay?
Well, I think since they've already begun, let them continue, but y'all coordinate on that issue.
Chris and Tim have been
Right.
So that works.
Thank you.
Mr. Kinsley, we're on to item number 6.
Number 6.
And we have a series of regulations that must be amended on actions of the legislature. These were noticed in August. Minor technical revisions have been suggested by the universities and have been incorporated. So, Chris, you want to walk us through these 4 amendments, please?
I'll be very quickly on page 76. This is, again, it all relates to the minor projects threshold increase from $1 million to $2 million. A parallel portion of it is for study activity. The threshold increased from $50,000 to $200,000. And in going through this, we also were asked by universities to make clearer some of our definitions. This second set of regulations, we noticed it in August. We received some technical advice from the universities. Very minor, so I would say this is second notice for final adoption. This relates to all 4 series of Chapter 14 regulations. I'd be glad to take any questions, but this has all been covered before.
Any questions from Mr. Kinsley regarding the proposed adoption of Chapter 14 regulations? There being no questions, I entertain a motion at this time. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. On to item number 7, which is approved notice of intent to adopt BOG Regulation 21.111, Campus Master Plan consistency with the state comprehensive plan and not in conflict with local government comprehensive plans. Mr. Kinsley?
Yes, this is a final action of the Campus Master Plan group that had met earlier in the year, and this is the very final regulation. We took action to repeal this regulation on further thought. They thought, well, this is a pretty good regulation, so we're bringing it back, but taking out the reference to the Board of Regents, and leaving this up to the Board of Trustees is the very last word in paren 5 of the regulation. This has unanimous university support.
Governor Solano.
Just an editorial comment in paragraph 2, the second word, the TEM, T-E-M instead of term.
Thank you.
Leave it to the professor to realize that. I just want you to know.
As amended.
Any additional comments? At this point, do I need to have a motion in place for the first notice, Tim, or Chris? Do I wait until actually we've had the notice period and then come back for the motion? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think all these move to the full board for recommendation.
Okay. Yes. Great. Okay. No, so the committee does need to recommend it then?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So then, at this time, we'll entertain a motion to go for the first notice for the amendment of Regulation 21.111. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Great. That concludes the action items that we have on the Facilities Committee this afternoon. We have several items that will be moved forward to the full board for their adoption on tomorrow. I want to thank the universities for their participation in assisting with pulling together the information as presented, particularly on the CTIF, with a special thank you to Debbie Galley from FIU for her help with this particular item. You should stay in a room when we're going to commend you like that. And with that, there being no further items, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
Madam Chair,
Governor.
I'd just like to say a welcome to Governor Marshall, who has come in. We're happy to see him here.
That's a wonderful thing that we should stop and pause. I was not there, but I heard that that you left us unexpectedly at our last meeting, and we're just so happy to see you here walking in very strong. And
glad to be back. Thank you very much.
I know. Thank you very much. There've been
Voting for more medical schools.
But weren't you at UCF at the time? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So there being nothing else, meeting is adjourned at this time. Thank you very much.
What did we